Welcome to our live event. It's time to get together and it's time to do a little bit of quilting, learn some tips and tricks, and have some fun and maybe some conversation while we're at it. My name is Colleen Tauke, and I'll be your instructor during this live event. Remember that the chat is open so that you can pop in and say hello, where you're watching from, where you're listening from, and maybe just a little bit about maybe a colorway you would like to see cross and crown created in. Um, because my house is full of quilts, I decided that I love to do mug mats for different seasons. So I have some done in school colors, my alma mater, Iowa State, which didn't get very far in basketball after all. Now that the tournament is all done, I have some done in snowflakes for winter, and I'm hoping that snowflakes stay as far away since it's April now. So I decided to go a little springy. The pattern classically is called cross and crown, but when I look at it, I think of lilies, something blooming. I want things to turn colorful outside. I'm tired of dull gray, everything. So it's time for some color outdoors. And I'm going to bring a little bit of it into my home. So Cross and Crown is the project we're working on, and you can see the QR code there pop up so that you can download your pattern. If you haven't already, remember you can always rewatch and take your phone over that QR code, just tap on it and it'll take you to an area you can just enter your email and you can download your pattern. So if you have it already, find something to write with. If you haven't downloaded yet, find a scrap of paper that you can maybe make some notations. We may have some tips and tricks in this project that will help you out maybe with other projects down the road. So remember to pop in and say hello. We're going to be working with a variety of colors. I decided that kind of peach and sunshiny yellow and kind of a sagey green is what I'm using. When I write my patterns, I've been trying to convert them to, instead of just color, I put the colors so that you can identify them in the picture, but I also put in fabric 1, fabric 2, fabric 3, so you can slot in your colors. Maybe you love reds, maybe you love pinks, and you can slip in then for fabric 1, whichever color you want. And that way, fabric 1, maybe for you, instead of being this green print that I'm using is kind of the background and the backside of my mug mat, maybe you want a red floral fabric and you can slot that in so that you can keep track of which is fabric 1 and 2 for you. Kathleen is popping in and said, how do your mug mats ring proof for furniture? Now, if you're going to use something that is going to be extremely cold with ice in it, like iced tea, and your container may sweat, then you may want to use a second or third layer of batting inside. You could also use the Insulbright. It has a metallic layer. It'll make it a little bit more water resistant, but not waterproof, okay? There are not too many fabrics that we sew through that would be waterproof. When our needle punctures through, you know that then there's going to be an area that moisture could move from one place to the other. So I use these, but make sure that as soon as I'm done consuming that cup, if it's a cold, chilled cup, that I take that cup to the kitchen. If these absorb moisture, yes, they will transfer possibly a ring, but there's enough insulation here to keep a hot cup from transferring enough heat into the mat to leave a ring on your table or a coffee table. I know about the rings because my kitchen table has those rings on it from hot soup containers that we did not use a mat or a placemat under. So I know about those rings. And as long as you have a mat that holds at least like a hot pad distance from the hot item to the wood surface, and then make sure you don't leave it sitting there for a long, long time, you should be fine. Kelly says hello from Arizona. Karen says hello from Utah. Pia says hello from sunny yet cold Denmark. The sun is up, but I can't actually see it through all the clouds here in Iowa today. Karen says hello from Utah. Roxanne says blessings from Pennsylvania. I've never made a mug mat, so I'm looking forward to this lesson. Wonderful. It's a great way to use up pieces of batting also. We always have pieces we trim off of projects, and this is a great way to use them up. Kathy is watching from Saskatchewan. Nancy is watching from Houston. Leona says good morning from Manitoba, Canada. Perfect. Now, a mug mat isn't a like I said, it's not waterproof. I don't think there's anything you can make with fabric unless you put a vinyl on the back, but then you wouldn't be able to quilt through it because whenever you puncture through, would let moisture go between layers. So just be aware of that. Okay. It at least protects the surface from scratch, from heat transfer for the time that you're drinking that cup. Cup's cool, so it's only hot at the very beginning. Sandra says, what about cork? You could use cork on the surface too, but again, you're going to probably be stitching through it. That area, it will absorb some. The cork that is made into cork fabric is very thin. It doesn't have as much ability to absorb moisture like a thick piece of cork would, but you could try it out. I have not used it that way. Jody says, 45 and gray in Seattle. Well, I think Seattle has a lot of changing weather, so you might get sunshine yet. Bridget says hello from the Netherlands. We are glad that you're watching. Okay, I'm using, let's see, 4 fabrics for my project. I have a floral, which is kind of the background of this project. So here in the rectangles and out in the outer corners and some of those tiny triangles. And I use that fabric 4 also as the back, or fabric 1 is the back. The peach print are the larger triangles you see here. Then I have a yellow check. It might be kind of hard to see it, but they're the little tiny points out here on the flower that are tiny little triangles. And then I used a solid green. I found a green that actually matched the background of my floral to use as my binding. And you could go to a solid, or you could even just reuse your floral as your binding. But I've listed the binding separately. One thing I want you to note, that the yardage for this, yes, those yardages seem extreme because it's for a set of 4. Okay, a set of 4 mug mats. So that's what the yardage seems kind of excessive there. But I thought, well, most of us are going to want a set of them for either the living room or the dining room table. So a set of 4 is the yardage there. For utility tools, your rotary cutter, acrylic mat, a ruler. I like to use the 6 or 6.5 inch square when it comes down to the trimming of some of these things. And even cutting these little pieces, it's a lot easier to maneuver the smaller ruler to cut these pieces. So you're going to be, other than that, some basting spray. You could use pins, totally optional. A fabric marking pencil is an optional thing, and we'll talk about that in a minute when we get to that portion of the project. And I did list a 6x24. So if you don't have a small square, you don't need to go out and buy one. You can use the long one. It's just a little bit longer to maneuver when you're cutting the small pieces. Okay, so let's get down to the pieces that we need and how we're going to cut those. So we've got our fabrics all selected. Oh, I forgot about the little green in the very center. It's very funny because the sagey color, and then I put an olivey tone with it. And first I picked it out because both of those colors happen to be in my floral. So I was using my floral as my indicator, and it works in the end. Sometimes you can put together colors that traditionally you would think, ooh, I'm not really sure about that. Let's see. We have Sandy saying hello from Jacksonville, Florida. Janet saying hello from Central Illinois. You've got our yesterday weather in Illinois because you're my neighbor. Denise is watching from Ontario, and it's still snowing there today. Okay, we are going to cut our pieces. This is what we're going to be required to cut to make these little guys. I have cut up some extra pieces. And again, the cutting is set for a set of 4. but this is what you're going to be cutting out. Of fabric 1, you're going to need some 2.5-inch squares. Now, this floral does have some very large yellow pieces of it, and I worked around those because I didn't want a big, huge piece of yellow up against some of my piecing. So you can be a little selective if your floral print is a little bit large in certain areas. So I just used the pieces, the area where it was a little bit smaller print. So you can be a little selective if you want. So we have 2.5-inch squares. We have 1.5 by 2.5-inch rectangles, and some, I know, 1.5-inch squares. Those are going to be the very outer corners of our patchwork. So I know those are small. It's good practice at cutting accuracy. So let's see. Hoosier says, I wonder if you could cut like one of the mats from Dollar Tree that is a plastic. You could slide something in after you quilt it, add another layer somewhere, and put a vinyl or a plastic on the back. That would work. If you really think you're going to give your mug mats a workout, maybe you live in an area that is high humidity and makes glasses and cups sweat on the outside. That would be a good solution. See, we're all just very creative about how we solve these things. Sandra says the quilt behind you is fabulous. This was part of a virtual quilt retreat that was done years ago. There are a lot of very simple blocks within it. There's some challenging things too. At some point, I may go back to reteach in a class, but it's just a combination of some interesting skills that we were working on back when the COVID days were going on. Angela says, good morning from North Texas. Okay, we've got a fabric 1 cut. The fabric 2 is some more squares, and that's out of the peach. Those are 3.5-inch squares. See, you got done with those 1.5s. Now you can do 3.5. Now they seem really easy, don't they? And then in the yellow, we're going to cut some 2.5s because these guys are going to be used together. And then we have that 1.5-inch square that's going to be in the very, very center of our patchwork. So this little square and the rectangles, we're going to set those aside because those are kind of our sashing portion. We need to create these pieces in each corner first. That's where our skills are going to get sharpened today. Dawn says she's in Washington. Beautiful spring morning there. We're glad you're joining us today. The cat lady, afternoon from the UK. It's beautiful and sunny there. Wonderful. Now, in order to make those pieces on the outside edge, some of those squares, these 2.5s and the 3.5 that you cut have to be cut cross cut in different directions. So we're going to work with our 2.5s first, and we're going to take our ruler, and in the instructions it tells you that they need to be cross cut corner to corner. We're going to cut quarter square triangles. Now, before I cut these, brought them down to the studio, I starched this. I use some Best Press. You can use your favorite sizing or starch process, but it does give the fabric a little bit more body. When it comes from the quilt shops, they have a starchiness to them, so they lay nice and flat. So if you're a washer, you may have washed that away, and we're going to add just a little bit back maybe, just to keep those quarter square edges stable, because by cutting quarter squares, what we're going to do is cut corner to corner, diagonal across the block in both directions. And that means we're going to have a lot of bias edges. And if you are new to the quilt world, the bias edge is the edge that has the most ability to become distorted. So I'm cutting both directions across that block, corner to corner. So I make these little tiny triangles. Remember, the long leg is the most stable edge. The short legs of your triangles are the bias edges. So we're going to treat them very carefully. When I used to teach, I would talk about butterfly wings, touching them as if they were butterfly wings. We don't want to over manhandle those edges. So we also need to cut the fabric 1 squares in the same way. There is direction behind each of those. It says they're cross-cut corner to corner, both directions. So we have now these pieces of these two fabrics. And I'm going to lay these out here so you can see them in front of me. And then we're going to take the peach color, which is, I've got to double check my numbers. The peach is the fabric 2 squares. Those are the largest squares that you've cut. They need to be cross-cut just once. So we're going to make half square triangles out of those. Now, there are so many methods out there for doing half square triangles, and you don't actually cut triangles. You work with squares, you do some stitching, then you do cutting. But in this case, we can't do it that direction. We have to actually cut triangles like this. Now, in this case, in a half square triangle, the long leg of the triangle is the bias edge. So that's where the stretch is. And then on the shorter legs, the shorter sides, those are straight of grain. So be aware of where that distortion can happen. Be very gentle with your pieces. Now, in order to put these together, here is what we're going to do. Your directions give you some really good diagrams. So please reference those because we're going to make 2 different kinds of units. It has to do with the positioning of these triangles and how they're oriented, okay? Don't make all of them the same or you're going to be upset with me. Make sure that you follow the instructions. You need 16 of one and 16 of another so that you have enough to make your set of 4 mug mats. Okay, Kathleen says, thank you for the information. When making a seasonal projects, also the pattern is lovely. It seems it could be a good project for Stash Buster. It could be, because if you can cut squares and subcut, you have enough to make one block, and you could use up a lot of scraps. We're not working with huge amounts of yardage here. And you could use these blocks to put on the end of a placemat. You could put it on the end of a table runner. There's so many fun things you could do with these little blocks. Let's see. We have Karen saying, good morning from North Carolina. Will there be a mystery quilt yet this year? They are running a Baskets and Blooms project right now. I don't know if it's already started. It's supposed to start in April, so we're really close to the starting point of that. So that is what they're doing for spring. I haven't heard about plans for fall yet. So, okay, let's lay out our triangles, our quarter squares. We're going to put our half squares over here for later. We're going to work on our quarter squares, and I am going to bring out a mat here so that I can prop them up and show you as I work on these. Okay, we need one of each in order to join these together properly. And the long leg of the fabric 1 and the long leg, and I've got to think about it, the long leg of the fabric 3 have to be positioned. I'm going to do these as if I'm making just one corner. We're going to work on just one corner like this because it's just repeated after that. The pattern is what we want to make, is this little corner. So having the instructions right next to you is a really great thing. Then I'm going to position 2 more. And like this. Now I am going to put in one of the corner squares, the little fabric 1 squares, just so you visually get a picture of what we're putting together here. Let me get that on my flannel board. Okay, this is the upper corner. The upper corner, here we go. Just like this, we have our square in place. We have a quarter square of the fabric 1 and then 3, and then fabric 1 and fabric 3. This is going to go here eventually, okay? But we have to get these little quarter squares made into a half square. And we have to make sure that the long legs are going the right direction so that they'll match up with the corner square there. So it will take sometimes a little bit of turning it around, going, oh, that's not right. That's not the unit I want. The diagram in your pattern will help you out, okay? If you've even selected different colors, you could use color pencil, a marker, crayon, something to kind of color code them if the 1s and 3s get too confusing. Some of us aren't, numbers are confusing. Sometimes color is better as a reference. So you can color the pattern in. That's why I left it grayscale. It might help you out. I noticed that when I started my fabrics yesterday, my quilt blocks, it makes the fabric more manageable. Yes, it gives it more body. It makes it so that when you're moving things, it's not floppy. and when it has more body to it, more structure, it does make handling the pieces a little bit easier. Let's see. Okay, so we need to make half of our half squares out of quarter squares like this and half like this. You'll notice they're actually mirror image of each other. Okay, so remember, don't make all of them the same or you will just be disappointed. Okay, I'm going to move these. Oops, I've got a piece underneath trying to walk away. I'm going to hold on to those for the next corner. And as I take these to the sewing machine, I'm going to make sure I put them right sides together and put them under the machine so I stitch the correct edge. And the way to do that, that's kind of a little help, can be to take a pin, and as you put them right sides together, put the pin along the edge you're going to stitch, because now they match up one on top of the other perfectly, and it can be confusing, and you can get them turned around as you move them from here to the sewing machine so that you know you're joining together the correct edge. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing with my other set. I'm really looking at this right angle here towards the center that I match them up nice and neat. If your pieces happen to be just a little bit off, guess what? They're oversized just a tiny bit so that you have the ability to be very accurate. I can write patterns to be super, super accurate, but the problem is that each of us is very unique in our sewing. Distortion happens. I understand that. So I always add in just a little bit of room so that you can piece like you've done it perfectly with just a little bit of extra. Now I've got my little sewing tab underneath my under there so that I can stitch onto that edge nice and gentle. This sewing machine doesn't really like to start on the very edge of fabrics, so I always use what I call a spider, a little scrap of fabric to get started so it stitches nicely and doesn't make a nest on the back side of my patchwork. Pick up my second piece. I've got it marked with a pin so I know which side I'm going to be joining. Then I can put that under the machine and I can piggyback one after the other so that I have those created. And again, your best 1/4 inch seam, kind of important here because we're working on small pieces. And if your 1/4 inch seam is too generous, your pieces, yes, there's a little slush in there, but not enough if you're using up a lot of fabric in the seam allowance. Okay, I've got my pieces seamed. So if I hold it up, there's one, there's the second. Now, these are very small. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do something really unusual for me. I'm going to press my seams open. I don't do that very often, but when we're working with small pieces, it's kind of important to try and reduce the bulk as best we can because we don't have a lot of area to spread out that bulk. So we're going to open up our seams, and this is where that spray starch or sizing will help without distorting our edges. I'm going to very gently open that and just finger press with the pads of my finger. Then I'm going to move that so we can see. Okay, the tip of my iron, could open that seam allowance up, and I'm going to let the weight of the iron do the pressing. I don't want to go back and forth with my iron because these are, like I said, there's some bias edges there, and the weight of the iron does the work. That's why irons are heavy. Okay, there we go. Get that one opened up. And a little fold back on my fabric there. Of course, when you want to press something really nice on camera, you get a little bit of a folded over tip. There we go. There are my pieces. I'll show you. And when I have them stacked one on top of the other, you can see they are mirror image with those seams pressed open. Now, if you like, take a scissors and trim your dog ears. And you're going to have one on each side because you pressed your seam allowance open. Okay, nice and neat. Now, I want to lay these back into their position for where they're going to be in the block. So I have to think about this. The long leg of the yellow goes up against the corner here. The long leg of this yellow goes here. And that is going to be my corner unit. Now, when it comes, you're going to look at this and go, this side is really long and this one's long compared to the square it's going to go with. That's the oversizing part. Now, where to place this square when joining here? What I want you to do is take your square, right sides together, and join it so that the outer edge aligns like this. So this right angle here is matched up. Oh, my hand's in the way. Let me get it back out of the way here. Where the seam comes out to the outside edge, we're going to make this be a straight edge. Okay, so right sides together, this right angle lined up, we're going to join right along the edge here. And yes, it looks a little funny because the piece is big. That makes it a little easier for you to handle. We're going to do a trimming process in a minute. If I had had you make those pieces any smaller, you all would have said, nope, and been away, gone. So in order to handle that, we made them just a little bit bigger. Okay, now you can see where I stitched. There's my 1/4 inch seam. I aligned the right angle here so that when I open it up, this seam between 1 and 3 comes out here. And we're going to press the seam allowance toward the square. Very gentle. We've got small pieces, I know. Do a little finger press first so it lays flat. Then the weight of the iron, and then we're going to do the other side. When it comes to making small blocks like this and trying to be accurate, it's almost as much work as making a large block. But they're so cute when they're done that it's worth the effort. Okay, now it's easy to get it twisted around. Lay it back down on your board. This time we're going to join this side. So it's going to be right sides together here, and we're going to stitch right along there. And in the instructions, you see the orientation against the square, and you'll know which direction to seam. Okay. But I know, putting together one of these this morning, that it doesn't take much to get it twisted around and end up at the wrong side in the wrong place. So double check before you stitch. It's always kind of the old carpenter's thought of measure twice, cut once. Well, position twice, sew once, I guess is the moral to this story. Okay, now look, I stitched it in the wrong place. Ah, how good is that? Boy, talk about listening to myself. Whoops, that's not my seam ripper. Okay, so here's a tip on taking out small pieces with a seam ripper. Nothing like trying to talk and stitch at the same time. Don't pull on your stitches. And this is something I was not taught until I became a quilter, because I was a garment sewer first. And in garment sewing, we did a lot of tugging on seams and pulling on fabric to cut down between the layers. And I can't imagine how much distortion we cause by doing that. But on a garment, you can get away with it because it's so large. But in quilting, when you're working on teeny tiny pieces, go in and cut like every 4th stitch with your seam ripper. Then from the back side, you can simply unzip the stitching and take it out. And you don't distort all of your tiny little pieces and the work you're doing to try and create nice, neat patchwork. Now, I'm going to attempt this a second time. This time, maybe talk less, stitch more. Okay, up from the bottom. Instead of stitching down the side like I did, I was supposed to stitch across the bottom where the two yellows are laying on top of each other. That should have been my clue. But okay, here we go. Second time's a charm. Let's not go for a third time. There we go. But you also got a seam ripper method for working with small pieces. So I guess that's a little positive add on there. Opening this up, voila, we made the right corner this time. Now, the overlap underneath there, you can trim away. You don't need that extra seam allowance there. So we're going to open this up and we're going to press. You can press either direction, whichever you feel most comfortable. You've got crisscross seams, one with the square here and one with the angle coming out the side. Pick the direction that your fabric is most comfortable with. The different weights of fabric sometimes will tell us, no, I want to go this direction or I want to go that. A lot of times in my patterns, I will give you directions on pressing, but sometimes the fabric just says, no, I want to go the other direction. So listen to it. It's okay. Okay, now that we've created our corner like this, I'm going to lay it down. And then you're going to look at it and say, but this joined with that piece is not the piece here. And it isn't yet. We have to do a trim process. This is where the oversized pieces in the center here allow for some trimming so we get the precise triangle that we need, okay? We're going to take this and we're going to use our ruler. And if you have a trim ruler, you can use, or where did I do my square ruler? Here it is. You can use trim rulers, but you can simply use your half square or your regular 6-inch or 6.5-inch ruler also. There's no need to buy every size of ruler. As long as you can get the piece underneath your ruler, you can more than likely use it. On the rulers, most of them will have a 45-degree angle, and I am going to place, well, the first thing I want to do is I want to have a marking pen or pencil nearby, and we are going to be looking to leave a 1/4-inch seam allowance from this intersection right here, from the square and the yellows that match up to it. From that point out, I want to leave my 1/4-inch seam allowance. So keep that in mind. We need our seam allowance. And I'm lining up the 45-degree line with the outer edge of my block. So the 45-degree line is there. And then I want to look for the 1/4-inch seam allowance left behind. And there we go. So I have my 1/4-inch seam, and then I'm going to trim off. It's just a little bit. It's not a lot. We're just giving it a haircut. And let me double check to make sure. Now, if you are nervous about trimming that, and I did not leave enough, or I left too much seam allowance, I'm going to go back and mark it with the pen. That will help me out. Okay, right there. Some rulers have so many marks on them, you can't always see where the 1/4-inch line is. And yes, I did not trim enough. One thing you can do is use a marking pen or pencil ahead of time if you're really nervous about trimming this. This is kind of like the training wheels of trimming. So I'm going to mark this so that I have kind of that insurance first. And then I'm going to go back and look and say, now that's a 1/4-inch from my marked line. So now I'm ready to trim. It kind of gives you that, okay, yes, I do have it right. And now I'm comfortable with trimming this off so that you know you aren't trimming too much. Whoops. There we go. Also, the rulers that have the tackiness on the back really do help keep it from shifting as you trim. What you need for this to line up with this, okay? So then we're going to put these right sides together. There we go. And I'll show you. That's pretty close. Now, the orange one is oversized just a tiny bit too. Again, building in insurance policies so we don't have any issues when we're done. They lay one on top of the other, and where the seams crisscross, and you can feel the thickness there, that's where your 1/4" seam needs to fall along the long leg of this joining of a pieced half square triangle and a cut half square triangle. Okay, let's get our scraps out of the way here. And I'm going to put my little fabric piece underneath. And I'm going to get these lined up to go under the needle here to join these together. Being really aware of where my 1/4" seam is. And hold on to the pieces all the way through the presser foot. Don't just let go at the end, because then you can get a little swing at the very end of your seam and it's not accurate all the way across the piece. I know that because I've done that. And I've realized that I really do need to hold on to my patchwork as it approaches that needle all the way until it's under the presser foot. Let's clean up a little bit here. Now, when I open this up, there we go. That little square of piece 1 gets right up against that seam. We're going to press the seam allowances toward the larger square, because that way we're not trying to fold back on any of the patchwork. It's the direction that the fabric really wants to go. Okay, and I'm going to give that a good press. And once you've made 4 of those, the first one is going to be, you're going to be very nervous about. It's like holding your breath, and then you're like, yes, it works. Now I feel confident. Now I can make the rest. So the first one of these corners you make will be kind of like your kindergarten corner. And then your patchwork will look really great. Now, when we get done putting these together, on page 4 of your instructions, it will say that this needs to be 2.5 inches when you're finished. 2.5 inches, okay? So we have dog ears we need to trim. There shouldn't be too much trimming. I got to get my ruler set up here. There's my diagonal line I'm going to put right on top of my patchwork. So I'm lining up my diagonal seam. And on one edge, it's just a thread on one side, the dog ear, and maybe a couple of threads there. Then I'm going to rotate my block so the dog ear is at the top again. Find my 2.5 inch mark on each side. And if you need reminder, you can use painter's tape, Post-it notes, glow line tape, whatever helps you find that 2.5 inch line very easily so that you trim them all the same. Here we go. And the trim is just slight, but it will make your patchwork look like you created the most perfect little corners on the planet, like that. Yvonne says, hello from British Columbia, Canada. And Sandra says, it makes everything so doable. Oh, well, the idea is not to frustrate you, it's to have fun. So we break it down into the small pieces, every little seam, so that you can have as much success and fun creating a little patchwork that I do. I know when I first started patchwork, I would look at things and go, oh my, that's a lot. But then when I would break it down into the little pieces, I'm like, it's just a lot of short seams joined together in different places. So once we get our mind wrapped around that, then it's so much easier to see the progress that you can make one little seam at a time. We have Border says hello from Germany. We're glad that you are joining in with us. Okay, so you need to make 4 of these, and I have parts of 4 at least. We're going to lay out our pieces so we can talk about creating our block, and have a few more. Okay, see there, once we create one, like I said, you're ready to create the other pieces. The rest I have as little tiny bits and pieces, thinking about how did we place our yellows and our greens, our quarter square triangles, if we're going to call them by their proper name, so that we get the long leg in the right place each time. We'll simulate that corner. Don't forget about that little square in the very center. He's kind of the linchpin that brings everything together. And then our simple little rectangles that are like sashing bars between all of that wonderful patchwork we did in the corners. When I look at these, I think of the lilies of summer, kind of. I have a lot of daylilies in my yard in a variety of colors. And these kind of remind me of that lily as they pop open. And I love the color of spring. Okay. Now, once you lay all your pieces out, basically you have a 9 patch. It's a varied 9 patch. I'll space these apart a little bit here. So we have 3, we have 1, 2, 3 pieces in each row. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So you know how to make a 9 patch. You join your rows together. And when you start looking at it, you're going to want to press your seam allowances in this row toward the bar, because that way it won't have to crisscross any seam. It'll lay nicely. These the same. They're going to want to press toward the center, which means in this row you will press the seams toward the outer edge, and then you join your 3 rows together in a simple varied 9 patch construction. Sometimes those very beginning blocks that we created are the base for everything else we create. Even though we're cutting up a lot of pieces in the corners to create our cross and crown block, we can have a lot of fun learning accuracy, good pressing skills, good cutting skills, and then create a block that just pops like spring. Once you have your pieces put together, then it basically is the layering and quilting. And I just decided, since it's a very springy block, I didn't want to do a lot of overly heavy quilting, and I kind of wanted this peach color to kind of be lift up. So I didn't even quilt through that area. I simply did straight lines on the sashing, so it crisscrosses in the very center, and then I outline stitched the greenish color just an 1/8 of an inch around the outside edge, and voila, you're done doing your quilting. And then add some binding to the outside edge, and your mug mat is ready to be used with your next beverage. Spring has sprung here, and we are glad that you have joined us. We are going to be doing a baby quilt next time around. So when 2 weeks comes along, you'll see me again for Gingham and Giggles. Thanks for joining me today.